Well, I was once in a fashion reality show, and today I'm going to tell you all about it, and I'm also going to review other fashion reality shows. So please stay tuned and let's do this. So I hope you managed to watch last week's video where I reviewed my style through the ages. I think it's very, very insightful, even insightful for this specific episode. So before I get into my experience in a fashion reality show, I wanted to point out that some of the visuals in terms of what I watch on TV that had fashion based content were styled by Elsa Clench and The Bold and the Beautiful. Those were basically the most regular TV shows that had fashion content. Otherwise, my main content was through magazines. My parents bought a lot of magazines. Some of them were not necessarily fashion magazines, but they had fashion content, and my main reason for watching those two shows was basically because I wanted to see clothes. I can honestly tell you I may not have comprehended every single thing I was watching, but that was the first introduction, and here is a short clip about the shows. Some of the shows that had regular fashion content that were consistent on TV when I was a kid was Style with Elsa Clench that used to air on CNN, and the soap opera The Bold and the Beautiful that had the storyline around the Forrester family and their fashion business. So for me, that is where watching fashion visually on TV began before fashion reality shows. I'm sure some of those images looked very familiar, and I will put links in the description for the trailers in case you want to have access to the shows I'll be talking about today. And another thing I want to mention is that the shows I'm reviewing, including the one I was in, I'm just going to use screenshots as I explain the show because I tried understanding fair use and copyright, and I just don't want something to happen to this video. So I decided I'll just use photographs in slideshows and do voiceovers, and I will put links to the trailers in the description. I will also put a link to last week's episode if you hadn't watched that. And once again, thank you so much for the support and comments and likes, and some of you also privately message me. For those of you who actually know me personally, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the support. And okay, I guess it's story time. Safari Fashion had the same format like Project Runway. If you're familiar with that show, basically you're given a theme and then there is a sketch and then there is shopping, then you sew, then you are judged, and then there's elimination. And there was something called Diary Room where you basically talked with the crew or the camera and you gave a review of what happened in that episode, and also usually included the eliminated designer at the end. Yeah, so another thing is that there were judges that were there every week, and then there were guest judges every other week as well. And we also did have a mentor in the show, and yeah, so that basically was the idea behind the show. There were also prizes, which I will put on this slide at the end. Okay, so I will start with the day-to-day life of being in the reality show. So there was an apartment we stayed at in Kilimani. It was relatively new. We did have to share rooms, and generally we were not filmed a lot in the apartments, just once in a while so that they could show that we were where we were living and what we were doing. We were not allowed to go home. We were not allowed to have our phones or basically communicate with anyone in the outside world. So basically we just talked to each other. There was no TV either. So yeah, it was going to the reality show and then going to the apartment. So the only time we saw the outside world was the commute from the house to the show premise, which was at Mark&Sal School of Fashion. That's where we recorded and that's where we did all our work. So my life as a contestant, or the type of contestant I was the contestant who basically avoided the camera. So if you do watch a lot of the footage, I wasn't in the same workroom as majority of the designers. I found a table at the corner next to the door of the workroom and I decided that's my spot. Generally because it's very difficult for me to work when other people are watching me. I feel very conscious and I tend not to do a lot of work, and especially if I decide to get in too much into my head and decide and start comparing my work to other people's work. So I like that I was in that corner, but the film crew had to intentionally film me because I wasn't with the others. And I also wasn't out to entertain the audience. I just wanted to win a competition which I thought would be judged fairly. I will get into it in the next segment. But yes, I was not a very happy contestant generally because I just didn't like the conditions we were staying at, but I really just decided to focus on what I came there to do and just to push myself, because it was also my first time to be in a reality show in that capacity, and to be away, not be able to communicate with loved ones was very difficult for me emotionally and psychologically, and being judged by my fellow contestants in different ways also didn't go very well with me. And I was also one of the older contestants, not the younger one, so there is just a way people assume because you've been in the industry for long, there are certain assumptions that are made. So that was my life as a contestant. The other contestants were a mix of people, and I honestly did not know any of them. There were some that had been in the competition earlier but pulled out. I knew them, but I didn't know the ones I ended up staying with, but I was pleasantly surprised by how talented people were. It was amazing work to see, and it was also just very refreshing to have seen how we are progressing as a fashion industry in Kenya. So for me, I was pleasantly surprised. I did avoid drama. It doesn't necessarily mean that drama didn't find me one way or another. I tried to just get along with people, but sometimes people just don't see things your way. So I just left it as it is because there's nothing much you can do about that. But generally, we did get along. One of the other contestants who was older than me was the one I hung out with the most. So yeah, so you've noticed in the photos I made sure I didn't include anyone, because I'll just be honest, a lot of contestants do not want to remember being in that show, or don't want to be remembered being in that show. So I try to avoid putting them in the pictures, but in the link I have put, you'll probably see them in the footage. Yeah. So now I'll get to the issues I had with the show. One of my biggest issues was how the judging was done. Not necessarily what was said during judging, but the biggest issue I had was one of the judges, basically the main judge. She was the one who was giving majority of the prizes, so she had a lot of stake in the show, and because of that, you'll realize that she would try, I felt like she would judge according to who she already wanted. Like one of the prizes being 6 months in her shop. Definitely, she will not just allow anyone to put their things in her shop because it is actually a shop with her brand. So she's maybe someone in line with her brand. I thought that was such a big conflict of interest. I felt like that could have been, that specific prize could have been just one of the competitions within the show. Then they have SK collection competition in that show. Then the winner of that would put their clothes in the shop. I think that would have been a better format. Another thing is, some of the judges were not industry players. Some of them just judged according to what they liked, which I personally didn't. Okay, I understand that you design for real clients, and I wasn't in control of the judging, but some of the critique that was given was just not in line with what I expected a show like that to have, considering that their format was supposed to copy Project Runway. And if you've noticed in the clip I had shown, there was a point where it was called Safari Fashion Runway and then Safari Fashion. I think there was actually an issue with the Project Runway franchise, because Project Runway is a franchise and using the Runway name maybe brought issues, because the truth is it did take a while before the show was aired. The show changed stations several times and it took 2 years to name the winner. So it wasn't well planned. There was a lot of controversy. There was about a week where we stayed without doing anything and we just stayed in the apartment, so it just made it more nerve-wracking because you still can't even communicate with your family, but you're in the show. Also, yeah, I think the only thing I really enjoyed in the show was the mentor session. I really enjoyed the mentor they got for us was really good. I actually learned new things from her, and I really appreciated her input. You'll see all those things in the clip. I really do not want to mention names, so enjoy watching the clips. If you can manage to watch a whole episode, please do. The episode that I was eliminated in, I personally think I was eliminated because I wasn't an entertaining person in the show, because my partner was the entertaining one and I did everything in that specific episode because that specific partner did not know how to sew and I did everything. But I was eliminated not because of my ability to sew or not because I'm not creative, but because he was more entertaining. That one I can tell you for sure. And the thing is, for that show was really emotionally draining for me. I didn't necessarily think that I wasn't a good designer because of it, because I have been in other shows. This is just part of being in the creative process. Not everybody will like your work, which is fine. There are people who will like your work, some people won't like your work. But I never used to really get negative critique if you really watch. The most of the critique was always that my work was good, Maybe I was too neutral. But I also wasn't really inspired to make something really out of the box in that show. I really did have a major designer's block. I don't think that would be the case now. I think now things have changed for me. So what else can I add? I think that's it. One thing I would mention that they needed to have thought through was how they were eliminating people, because for me, at least when I was eliminated, I had means to get home, and you were eliminated very late in the evening. But there are some people who were being eliminated and they didn't know how they were going to get home, and especially if they were not from Nairobi, I felt like they didn't think it through, especially with the first elimination. And also other reality shows usually have counselors to talk to you about the elimination process, because it's usually very emotional, and if you don't have that capacity, you can get into depression. So professionally, other reality shows do have that, and they didn't have that. I feel like they really did not research the show fully, and they didn't plan it well enough for it to have been a huge success. And it is still commendable that they did the show, but I feel like it could have been much better if it was better planned, and if the people involved were neutral parties, because even the person who produced the show was a sister, of the person who was giving majority of the prizes. So you can see, yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired, but that's my honest opinion. I am open to anyone saying anything different. Yeah, so that was my experience. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, so that was it. Thank you for listening to this story. It wasn't easy. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, but here it is. Project Runway is a reality fashion competition made for TV, and it started in 2004 and has been going on till the most recent episode just concluded, and it's changed over time in different formats, especially the judges changing. It started with the hosts being Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn, and Nina Garcia as well, being the main ones, but Tim Gunn and Heidi left to start their own show, and Nina Garcia stayed on, and they've changed judges. So they also have spin-offs. They have Project Runway Junior, Project Runway Threads, Project Runway Startup, and they also have other franchises of Project Runway in other countries. Other spin-offs also were specifically by Tim Gunn, like Under the Gun and other shows. It's mainly done in the USA, so you'll find that even if it's a foreign designer, they would have to get a work permit to be on the show. So in a nutshell, that's Project Runway. And lastly, the format is basically you're given a task, you get inspiration from the task. It could be you go out or you stay indoors, and then they go shopping at Mood. Mood has always been a focal point in Project Runway. And then that's after sketching, and then you go and sew the outfit, then you do the runway show, then they have the elimination process. That's basically the show format. So apart from that clip I've just shown about Project Runway, what I think about Project Runway is, for a long time it's been about getting the next big fashion designer. So it's a very old school way of thinking about fashion in terms of being this big brand, this big global brand. My personal opinion, I think, is that was possible when people who are in the industry were fewer. And the truth is, a lot of these big fashion brands have a lot of money behind them, so they can be able to become these big brands. So I know that there was some conflict with Heidi and Tim Gunn, with the producers of the show, when they wanted to change the format, which is why they went to Making the Cut, and I'll discuss Making the Cut next. But yeah, there was some creative conflict, and after watching Making the Cut, I understood why, and it made a lot of sense, because first you think it's going to be exactly the same, but it's not quite the same. And also Project Runway really do emphasize a lot. There is a lot of praise with someone who knows how to sew. So people like me love that. So if you know how to sew, you know how to cut, and you're also creative, it's such a big plus in Project Runway. So it can be a disadvantage for people who have teams and then they just design. So it really needs someone who can also sew, and someone who studied fashion, extra bonus. I think someone who knows how to sew but hasn't studied fashion could also participate in such a show. So the evolution of this show has been very interesting. Also the spin-offs, I really did enjoy the Project Runway Startup, because it's very similar to Shark Tank. So basically you pitch your idea to the investors. So there's a bunch of investors and you pitch your idea, but of course you just present the way you do in Shark Tank, and they give you feedback. And the interesting feedback about it is they would tell you, this will be a trend and then it will die off. So you don't really have a business here. You don't need an investor. You probably just need this finance. And sometimes they actually just did finance the project, maybe a loan. They would even offer loans. The other thing they would tell you is, this looks like it would be able to stay, and maybe it will just change. Like you could have created a way a zip is put or something. That's just an example, and then that idea can be used in different ways and it can still create new things. So innovation, and then also timeless pieces are the hardest things to do, but if you can manage to do it, then you are in it for the long haul. So it had a lot of good feedback about the fashion industry. They did have focus groups that you had to engage with, so that you could get feedback if it's even worth investing in. So some people would not get an investment, but they'll be told you'll be in a focus group, and then you'll find out if you're if whatever you made is worth investing in. And also the project Runway Threads was for kids sewing. It can be very intimidating things, little kids sewing such elaborate things, because you'll be like, okay, what will they be sewing when they're older? But anyway, it's awesome to see that very young children can also sew. And for me, it's actually a passion I am really working on, to get African kids sewing at a very young age. Because I started sewing at a young age. I started making dolls with my hands, and unfortunately I don't have any of those dolls or pictures of them. But I started making clothes for my dolls and dolls with my hand, and I used a lot of my mom. My mom had a sewing kit. I just used to use a lot of her things. I don't think she was very happy about it, but I also don't think she was so pissed off about it, because I think she was just happy I was doing something. Yeah, so that's the gist of Project Runway. Do watch it. It has so many seasons. Season 19 just finished, so go ahead and watch it. You learn a lot. You learn a lot about the design process, about even the designers that have done very well. You'll find that most of the designers that have done very well are the ones who did Project Runway at the beginning more than now. Why? Because the industry has changed. It's no longer about being the next big fashion designer. It's just about being able to create for your niche market. That's what fashion has become about. Yeah, so that's my review of Project Runway. Thank you.
Next in fashion is another reality TV show that is in Netflix and very similar to Project Runway, in that designers are given a task to do. They draw inspiration, they work on the outfit, and then they do a runway show and they are judged on it. There are very many guest judges. The main faces you see are Tan and Alexa, who are the hosts. And another main thing is that the designers don't have to sew, because they have access to seamstresses and pattern cutters. It also has a wide international cast, so a lot of the designers are from all over the world.
So next in fashion was a reality show that showed 2020, and it's by Netflix, and it was actually very interesting and a bit different from Project Runway. They started off the contestants working in teams, and then later on now they could work as individual designers. They really tried to highlight specific talents contestants have. So if you're good at printing fabric, they would highlight that. If you're good at streetwear, they'll highlight that, and that was very, very good. Another thing I liked about it is, unlike Project Runway, which is strictly for American designers, this was international. There were designers from all over the world. Still they missed Africa, but it is what it is. So it was very interesting. I think it was my first time to see a competition where there was so much diverse points of view. It was also the first show I saw where it wasn't so, knowing how to sew was not so emphasized. They did have seamstresses and they did have pattern makers, which the designers had access to. I wasn't a fan of the hosts so much, and especially their styling tips. I found it incredibly annoying. I watched a critique about it on a YouTube channel, and I agree with the guy that it would have been better, instead of giving us styling tips, it would have been better for them to focus on the designers and what work is like, or talk more about the theme that they are working on. So if it's streetwear, then they talk about streetwear. If it's rock and roll, they discuss about more rock and roll, just to inform the audience what these things are about. That would have made more sense. So the show had actually been cancelled after the first season. I'm not sure the reason, but now they're reviving it back. And Alexis, the female judge, has been replaced with Gigi Hadid, so I guess we'll see how that goes. But it was a very refreshing show to watch. It was very different. You understood the importance of having a signature. The judges were also various diverse industry players, some of whom I did not even know at all, but apparently are famous, and from different genres of fashion. So I would definitely recommend that you watch that as well. If I compare it to Project Runway, I still prefer Project Runway in terms of content. I guess it's because I relate more to how the Project Runway designers design. I don't know if it's a show I would apply for if I was to apply for a show, let's just say that, but it was very interesting and very good to watch. So do have a look at it and see for yourself.
Making the Cut is another reality show that was started by Tim Gunn and Heidi Klum, very similar to Project Runway. Designers are from around the world and not only US. Season 1 was very interesting because they managed to travel around the world. Season 2, because of COVID, they stayed in the US. Season 1 judges were Naomi Campbell, Nicole Richie, Chiara Ferragni, I think I have massacred that name, Joseph Altuzara, and then season 2 had Jeremy Scott and Winnie Harlow. Tim Gunn was still their mentor, Heidi Klum is still the host, and they do have seamstresses who make the clothes, and yeah, they have to prepare tech packs, and basically the show format is very similar to Fashion Runway except for that detail.
Making the Cut is my favorite reality TV show currently. It's not that I don't like Project Runway, but I like that Making the Cut is an elevated version of Project Runway. The format of the show is very similar, except that of course they don't go shopping. And Making the Cut, from the word go, they really want the contestants to focus on being designers and not necessarily the best seamstress in the whole world. So that's something that was changed. So what they do is you have to prepare a tech pack after you have created your work, and then you put it in a bag and it's collected. If it's not collected, that means you have a day tomorrow to do everything yourself. There's always an advantage to knowing how to sew no matter what happens, because if the seamstress they've hired, which they never show who they are, but if the seamstress they've hired does not understand what you put in the bag or what you're trying to do, because sometimes designs can be very technical, you will get an incomplete or not even touched outfit. On the other hand, what I've seen designers do is they will let the seamstress work on the outfit to a certain level and then they do the rest. So if it's a trouser, you make them do the basic trouser and then you'll add the details and stuff like that. So I think there's a very big advantage of just being in a competition where you're just thinking about building your brand, thinking about your brand DNA. I have seen like the judges really emphasize on I can't see you in this outfit, or yes. And a lot of the designers are successful people, so you will find that you will be told your outfit is good for your niche market, because it's so much about niche. It's good for your niche market and it might not be global. And the show is about looking for a global brand generally, but still within your niche. And because Amazon is the one that is sponsoring the show, the outfits, because we watch it after they've recorded, the outfits are available on Amazon immediately after the show and people buy. And I've actually gone to the Making the Cut store in Amazon to see reviews, and you see the reviews and you'll notice that the clothes are mass produced. I think Amazon mass produces them. I don't think it's a contestant if you won. So I know some of them had quality issues, others didn't, but I'm sure it's being worked on. But it's a very good way to push your brand. So far the people who've won are doing well. They do get shops in LA with their own brand, so that's also a very good price, and I can't remember the amount of money they're given back. Yeah, so I like the format of the show. Season 1 was very good because they went all over the world. Another thing I've forgotten to mention is that Making the Cut is not strictly for American citizens, it's also open to global designers. So if there is a show to participate in, it would be that one, and it's one of those shows where I wouldn't even care if I won or not. I'd just be happy that I was a contestant, because I know it will push me, and I have started reaching the place where I do things not because of winning but because of growing. So definitely check out Making the Cut. They've done 2 seasons and they are available on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it from there.
The Hype is also a fashion reality show. Its main focus is streetwear, and they do talk a lot about the business of fashion and also try and keep up with trends, try and represent culture, and it had a diverse array of designers, but it is mainly an American show, so most of the references are American, and if you're a hip-hop fan, you'll probably identify it more or understand it more. The judges are people who are in the hip hop and streetwear industry. And the guest judges were also from the same. A lot of the designers already had established brands in whatever they were doing in streetwear.
Recent show that I have watched is The Hype, and The Hype is a streetwear design competition. Same format as Project Runway. Difference being like Next in Fashion and Making the Cut. They also have seamstresses that help them, and they have to create tech packs as well with the details of what they need. And the thing about using seamstresses and tech packs is if they don't understand it, actually you'll get your garment back when it's not finished. And I'm seeing this has become a trend in a lot of these reality shows, except for Project Runway. Project Runway, I've seen, I think your final collection is when they'll give you a seamstress. I have a feeling that they'll start integrating that more and more as time goes, but I think they just don't want to do it right now because it'll look a bit obvious that they're trying to do what the other shows are doing. So back to The Hype. So the thing about The Hype is, just be warned, they do allow curse words there. So if it's not comfortable, if you're not comfortable with it, I wasn't comfortable with it. I don't even know if I'll watch another season of that show. Not necessarily only because of the curse words, but because I really I don't think I relate much to streetwear. I watched it, I didn't even have an opinion because I was like, I really don't understand streetwear at all. And another thing that was interesting about the show is that apart from making brand new pieces, they also did have blank pieces. So like streetwear has a lot of hoodies, baggy pants and all those. So they had a lot of plain street hoodies, trousers and stuff like that, and the designers were allowed to actually use those and then make it their own. So it was allowed in the competition, so that really helped a lot of the designers there who couldn't sew. Another thing is there was a clear distinction between the designers who can sew and the ones who can't sew. And the interesting thing, because it's an American show, is that the ones who can sew come from small towns, meaning that they don't have access to people who manufacture, people who make things. So they had to learn how to sew. And the ones that didn't know how to sew were from LA, New York, and they had access. They had teams. And it seemed like all the designers had their own brands and their own signature work. So another thing about the show is it was about building a portfolio. So despite the theme they give you for each episode, it was supposed to be in line with your brand and what you're doing, because every single episode was about building your portfolio. And the interesting thing is they worked with professional photographers after every episode to get very good pictures for their portfolios at the end, and at the end their work is judged and then they are given the prizes. I was very happy with the judges they were given. I was learning a lot about especially the relation with hip-hop, the cultures in hip-hop. I'm not a hip-hop fan, so I don't know so much. I just know that when I was a kid, there was an issue between East Side and West Side. And I also know that there are gangs and stuff like that. So I know colors matter, how people dress is influenced by where they grew up and all that. So you can see that a lot in the show. The other thing in the show was, I think actually that's about it. Yeah. It was a show that I think it really blew my mind, trying to understand hip-hop and the fact that hip-hop fashion, because it's streetwear, seems like it's hip-hop fashion, and the fact that it can end up being very crafty if you don't watch it, because it's so artistic. Streetwear is very artistic, and you have to express it in a way that it doesn't end up looking like a craft project, because sometimes some designers were drawing that line where they were almost seeming very craft project like, because or maybe how they did their patchwork or how they did their font. And the show had extra machines for screen printing, painting, embroidery. They had access to all those, so they could do it graphic. They could even create their own print. They didn't go shopping like Project Runway do. In fact, I think it's only Project Runway where people go shopping for fabric. These other shows, it's like they have in-house fabric that the contestants will use. Yeah, so that's it about the hype. I learned a lot about streetwear. Yeah, so season 2 is supposed to be coming out this year at some point. So season 1 is out, and it was in HBO, as I said. Yeah, so you'll be able to watch it from there.
I would like also to just highlight America's Next Top Model, which was a modeling competition. And for this specific show, I learned more about photography, models, working with models, what kind of poses appeal to men, what kind of poses appeal to women, how different photographers work, different size models, creative photo shoots, how the modeling industry works. So I did benefit a lot from the show, despite the fact that it wasn't directly fashion design based show, but it did have a lot of good pointers for a designer to use, especially when they're working on their portfolios and working with other industry players. Another special mention is Naomi Campbell as a judge in making the cut. I thought her critique was very honest and sometimes also very brutal, but I felt like if she really believed in your work, she would really be hard on you so that you could really push it. And what I also loved was how her and Heidi at the end bought some of the clothes from the designers. And actually, one of the designers did say it wasn't for show. It was actually honest, because they thought it was for show. But after the show, their assistants actually called to ask for their clothes. So like if they really supported your work, they would, even if you didn't win. And I really appreciate that. And I also just liked how she kept in touch with current trends. So her critique was always very good and interesting. Another judge I would like to point out is Tommy Hilfiger, who I have seen in 2 shows. One was Next in Fashion, and the other was the last season that just passed for Project Runway. And his critique as well is so essential. For once, sometimes judges give you critique. I'm sure if you watch it sometimes, some of these shows, they don't make sense. They are critiquing something, but they are not really articulating exactly what they mean. It's very vague and you have to interpret it. But with Tommy Hilfiger, it was very, very clear. He would tell you if the outfit was going to sell, it wasn't going to sell, it's going to sell for a short time. He really talks about the business side of fashion. So even when he was talking to the designers, he was just trying to tell them to think about long-term goals in their fashion businesses. And also sometimes narrowing it down to who your customer is, what your brand DNA is, because not everyone is meant to design for mass production, but sometimes you also design for niche markets. Another thing I'd like to mention is that generally in the shows, what I have noticed is clothes have become more gender neutral, meaning that the clothes could be worn by both male and female, and not necessarily because you designed for a specific gender. So what has happened is you will find that there's a mix of models and you will choose amongst them. Another thing I've noticed is there's also size inclusivity. So you'll also find plus size and slender models and average size people. There's also a lot of talk about environment. You'll see some designers' main brand DNA when they discuss about their brands, they're thinking about the environment. Another thing is also thinking about cultures and ethnicities, and also not being too offensive. So those are some of the things I've noticed about shows in the recent years.
Thank you so much for watching this very long episode. I really did not even think it was going to be this long. Thank you for watching it to the end. And next week I will be reviewing documentaries, fashion documentaries that I think you should watch. If the documentary is on YouTube, I'll probably just link up the documentary on YouTube. If not, I'll tell you where to get it, and I don't think it's going to be this long. Thank you for watching this. I was really tempted to cut this into 2, but I figured no, let me just make it 1. I'm really trying to see if you guys prefer longer videos or shorter videos. Do let me know if you prefer that I just do it in less than 20 minutes or less than 10 minutes, what format you prefer. Thank you for watching to the end. Bye.